So yeah, Mitch, hello, welcome.
Hey Sam, how's it going? And hi everyone on the chat. Looking forward to having a discussion.
Amazing. Mitch, I'm very well. Very excited for this chat today. Mitch and I are high school friends, and we've followed each other's journey throughout the startup landscape here in Australia over about the last 10 years, which is cool. So for those that don't know, Hyper, we are a startup studio. So we support founders from idea stage all the way through to raising funding, full design, development, getting you to market and everything in between. So it's wonderful to have Mitch here from Folklore, one of our venture capital partners that we'd love to showcase our founders to. So Mitch, I'm going to hand it over to you to do a bit of an introduction about yourself, how you got here, Folklore, and then, mate, we'll start to have a bit of a conversation to support everyone here who's looking to build a startup.
Sounds good, mate. And if I start getting a bit long-winded, just tell me to hurry it up. I'll start with Folklore itself. So I'm an investor at Folklore Ventures. We're a software venture firm. We invest pre-seed, seed, and Series A. Our motto in our firm is first check to forever. So we invest pre-revenue, sometimes pre-product. We love investing in software businesses and have since the fund's inception in 2014. 3 funds in, and our third fund is still actively investing. Myself, before Folklore, I worked at a scale-up called Eucalyptus. Joined in about 2021 when there were about 50 people, and helped them scale to about 300. Loved the journey, and really enjoyed the whole process of working at a scale-up. I selfishly joined Eucalyptus to try and get some inside coverage as to what kind of venture-backed scale-ups look like in the view to one day being an investor. It's something I've always wanted to do, working with founders and helping dreams come true. And seeing so many different ideas at once is a real blessing to be able to do for work.
Fantastic, Mitch. I appreciate that. And you've also had your own hand in the entrepreneurial journey quite a few years ago as well.
Yeah, I did a commerce degree at uni, and I got sidetracked a little bit. I worked at a startup out of the CSIRO while I was still doing my degree, and ended up staying there for about 4 years. Just kind of loving the autonomy of being able to make your own decisions, and the dual purpose of being quite scary, but also very fulfilling when the things that you've made come to life. And then after that, I actually started a food business in Melbourne called Tub of Dough, which was a dark kitchen on Uber Eats, kind of before dark kitchens were a thing. We launched it not really knowing what to do. We had a few connections in the food industry and thought we'd give it a try. And we ended up being the #1 Uber Eats store in Richmond for a while, and then launched a few other kind of segments too. Ultimately, selling cookie dough wasn't what I wanted to do for a living, so we sold out of that.
Awesome. Well, mate, not to pump you up too much, but I guess, from your background, having started your own startup and having a hand in that, to then working in a successful, I guess, scale up to now being in the investor hot seat, I'm sure there's a lot of insight that you can take in your own personal journey, which comes into when you do look to potentially inject some capital into new ventures that come across your desk, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a bunch of insights, but the most important one is just empathy for how bloody hard it can be, and constantly reminding myself that this is a big risk that people take, and it's a big commitment, and a lot can go wrong, and also a lot can go right. But the humility to understand that I'm just making decisions on what is big decisions for other people's lives.
Yeah, no, that's it's good to have the insight into, I guess, the personal side behind this whole investor and founder relationship, just to kind of take it away from being a black and white, financial conversation. There's a lot more to it, which is cool. So I guess, today, everyone, for listening in, a lot of this is going to be around how to make yourself a founder and also your startup attractive when you are in a pre-revenue state to an investor to have that conversation. And then we're going to really talk about, I guess, the process in terms of that conversation with a VC and investor, and a few tips and tricks to help you as you embark on that journey. Mitch, I might just ask before we go into that, just to give everyone a bit of an understanding further to around Folklore. You guys mentioned that you are an early investor. I guess, what does that mean? And how does it typically work in terms of you guys injecting capital for investment?
So I think a lot of venture firms say they're early, and I think the word early probably captures a few stages. And I think it's important to understand when you're talking to an investor, what part of early they're in. Because early can kind of constitute angel rounds, pre-seed rounds, seed rounds, and even Series A rounds. and they're very different things. Folklore operates mainly in pre-seed and seed style funding, which is like in the hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars round, that kind of area. That doesn't necessarily mean there has to be like an angel round beforehand, but sometimes there's angels involved. But I think it is important to kind of break down what early means. There are a few milestones within the concept of early. If you go like pre-product is probably the earliest you could look to raise capital. There's then pre-revenue, which is where you've got an MVP, you're talking to customers and you're yet to kind of raise revenue. Then there's like early revenues, but not yet at a level where like you're looking at revenues as a serious thing. And then there's kind of like your, hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars of ARR, which is when you start moving into kind of like late seed, Series A territory. That's the whole range of early, and I think it's important to like match who you're trying to talk to against like where they sit.
Mm-hmm. Cool. No, that's a good explanation. Thanks for that, mate. And so with, I guess from your point of view, so you're sitting there most days and you're getting founders come and approach you from all different angles, whether it's someone emailing you, hitting you up on LinkedIn, working through a partnership network like from someone like ourselves here at Hyper. I guess, what stages are you seeing people out there? Like, have they just got a pitch deck or they got a product? Like, is it really varied when they're coming talking to you? And I guess how refined and polished are those people when they come and talk to you, probably out of maybe a percentage?
So I think that's like the most interesting part of the relationship here is that like, if you're a founder, you're thinking about your business all the time and like your singular pitch all the time. If you're an investor, you're seeing hundreds of pitches every month, and like you start drawing pattern recognition, and like there is a really wide range of both like the stage that the business is at, and also like the, I suppose, polish, but maybe like understanding of what the investor's looking for is probably a better way of saying it from the founder pitching. Like there's a big range, and in terms of like getting off a first call and being like, wow, that like there was no obvious areas where that founder wasn't thinking about what the investor would say. I would say it's like quite rare. Like I would say less than 10%, probably less than 5% of calls are in that category.
Yeah. Okay, cool. That's good insight. So I guess the biggest thing furthermore is identifying an investor and albeit in this scenario, Folklore, that matches the mandate of their investment mandate with also, I guess, what you are offering. So whether it's a VC that's focused on B2B SaaS or D2C or whatever it is as well, trying to provide that relationship. So it's not just completely cold.
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of like the information from the fund's website is a great starting point. But if you want to go a bit deeper, because sometimes they'll stay relatively open to try and attract everything. If you want to go a bit deeper, look at their investments and what they've invested in and what they've followed into. I think that gives a great indication as to where the fund's really putting their money where their mouth is. And I think the other thing to think about as well is the stage of the fund. Like you can work out, like each firm has one or two or multiple funds, and you can work out when they've raised their fund itself, like what year. And most funds try and invest the capital they've raised in the first 3 or 4 years. So you can work out like what stage of the fund they're in. Are they in the finding new companies stage? Are they in the backing their existing company stage? Are they closed for investment? You can work that out too.
Yeah, cool. So I guess for most listening in here today, and a lot that we work with through our Accelerate process, a lot are in, I guess, the pre-product, pre-revenue stage. So building out the product, going into actionable activities. So from your point of view, when you are speaking to founders in this stage, we speak a lot around demonstrating traction. What do you see that really, I guess, tickles the fancy of an investor that these founders are presenting to you?
Yeah, I think like this job's really interesting because investing at like this stage of companies, it's basically like almost all, like there's so much uncertainty everywhere, and so you really have to look at things with a positive frame of mind and be like, well, what does this business look like if things go really well? And what you use to help you along that is some kind of traction or some kind of momentum. And there's different ways of thinking about momentum. Like if you're going to the most concrete stage of momentum, it's like, here's the revenue, here's the customers, here's what they're saying about us. That's a great sign. But like not every business has that. And if you're starting, you don't just start with customers and revenue. So I think it's important to think about what are the signs you can show to an investor that gives them confidence that if things go well, this could be really good. And And what does that mean? So like if you don't have revenue, you don't have customers yet, are you talking to your customers? Like, do you know what your customer wants? Do you have like a really deep understanding of like who the customer is and how many of them there are? And like, do you have a strong understanding of like what the competition in the market looks like? Anything that shows that you've really deeply thought about the problem and the users experiencing the problem and have some kind of backing that your theory is right. And so like, revenue is the thing that shows your theory is right, but there's other things too that can show, like, that can give you an indication that your theory is right. And it's free to talk to customers, and it's free to network, and it's free to learn more about your problem.
Yeah.
So when we look at pre-revenue businesses, that's the kind of stuff we like to get really deep on.
Yeah, awesome. I guess a lot of the things that we encourage and we know that sticks in that is, say, for example, it could be an early adopters program. So, you might be a B2B SaaS platform and you go out there and you say, speak to 50 companies, and they might just sign up and say, hey, once you're live, this is the type of platform that I'd be willing to pay for. And I'd like to have some sort of access there. And you might even say to them, great, you get 50% off your first 6 months. I presume that type of activity would be something that would demonstrate some traction or momentum that would provide you with a bit more concrete affirmation that there's a likelier path to success.
Yeah, for sure. I think like a dangerous position to be in is to have a business that's like really reliant on funding or else, and like going in with a position statement like, when we get funding, we'll be able to go to talk to customers, is a position that puts an investor in like a really dangerous area where it's like, it's kind of chicken and egg. So like something that gives you traction, or something that gives you a sign that you're moving in the right direction before you have the acquisition capital, or like the capital to hire staff to go and like scale, is really helpful.
Yeah, fantastic. In terms of like partnerships is another big thing that we speak about. So, already well-established companies that, have been within the industry, if you can potentially have some sort of partnership. Now that might be a brand collaboration, it might be a referral program, it might be that they are going to be willing to pay to potentially, work in some sort of conjunction with you. We find that's a great way to obviously get endorsement from an existing business within that industry. Do you see that quite a bit as well?
Yeah, like if we think about how a founder should be spending their time, and it's like such a hard question because you have to kind of do it all. You have to build a product, you have to understand that there's customers there to do it, you have to find a channel to scale. And so like you're thinking about competitive advantage over time. If you're thinking about building something that people really need and really want and are willing to pay for and solves a problem, great, like you're working in the right direction. But you also need to think about how are you going to find these types of people, and how are you going to engage those users, particularly early on. And sometimes like leveraging existing distribution networks is a great way to go.
Yeah, fantastic. One thing that we really try and help our founders on is, you're obviously at the very beginning of your idea, you're so excited, you've got this massive vision, and you're almost sometimes even solving a few different problems for a few different customer subsets as well. And we understand as well, in order to get it right, you just need to focus on one, build it very lean, focus on that. You often find that some people do come to you with like too big a vision that they need to really refine.
This is an interesting one. So there's two schools of thought here. Like one school of thought is that like you make a series of small bets and you find the thing that works, and then you kind of go gung-ho on that thing. The other thing is you work really hard to find the problem to begin with, and then you kind of like double down on that from the start. I think the biggest risk for a founder is like spreading themselves too thin at the early stage, and that can take a number of forms. Like focusing too much on raising capital and speaking to investors early on is a detriment to like the other aspects we spoke about earlier, like building the product or thinking through distribution. Spending too much time on distribution without a product or without speaking to like thinking about your capital structure is a problem. And then like spending too much time on trying to solve a series of things is a problem too. I think like the best founders I've seen are the ones who can kind of understand what is needed at the time, and then think about the opportunity cost of their time importantly. And like that changes heaps as you scale to like the type of founder you are at the very start is so different to seed, so different to Series A, and so different to like, when you've got 100 or 200 employees. So continually thinking to yourself, like, is this the best use of my time? How can I like kind of trade this off or use it better? Super important. And like, it's actually a trait that we think about a lot when we're investing in founders.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's really interesting. With, when people come to you as well from a pre-revenue point of view, or let's just say pre-product as well, very early stage, and they maybe, they are looking for that initial capital injection. How often do you find, and is it more attractive to you if they've already been able to potentially go out and raise 50, 100, 200 grand from friends and family, angels, etc.? So they've already been able to prove that the ability to do that before talking to you. Like, is it often you're the first time to invest, or they've already got some potential people in their cap table?
It varies. I think the benefit of being able to raise from like friends, family, angels, strategics is kind of twofold. One, it like lowers your reliance on a venture firm, which creates like an evening of the playing field in terms of like the valuation, the terms, whether or not you actually need to raise the money. Two, it gives you time to like invest in the product and invest in like building that traction that makes yourself more attractive to a venture firm. But yeah, I think it's a good sign. Like being able to do that kind of stuff is a good sign. When you invest in a founder at like pre-seed and seed stage, and you're putting them on the venture track, which is probably not for every business, but it's like the business that requires that kind of growth curve. They're going to be needing to raise again and again, and if they're very successful, they'll be needing to raise multiple times, until eventually where like if the founder hires really well, their role is basically like, how do you tell a convincing story to one, raise capital, and two, attract great talent? So like if they've shown that they've got an ability to raise capital, that's a sign that like, down the track, maybe this is the type of founder who can raise more and more money from like more and more kind of scrutinized investors.
Yeah, cool. One thing just kind of about that initial, I read an article that, as you said, you get say 100 pitches that come across your desk per week. So on average, you probably spend 6 seconds looking at a deck, right? And the founder has probably spent hours and hours refining that deck. So 6 seconds, I think, is an average. So I guess from your end, is there anything that comes to life when you are reviewing a pitch deck in those, say, 6 to 10 seconds that would be maybe a tips or tricks for a founder to kind of really make sure it's standing out?
It's a great question. I think like people obsess over pitch decks because it's like the thing that you control. I think that on the whole, pitch decks are more complicated than they need to be. Like what's the purpose of a pitch deck really? If you're sending it cold, or if you're sending it to someone cold, it's to get enough interest to set up a meeting, really. Like that's the purpose. The first meeting, is the investor going to like ask you the detailed questions that come out in DD? No, they're going to get to know you, understand the problem, understand the space. So my encouragement would be like, look at your pitch deck or investor memo through the lens of, is this like, can I understand this, or could I give this to a strange person to understand in 10 seconds? I think the risk is that like trying to sound intelligent can maybe convolute messages. There's nothing wrong with like being very, very simple and very, very clear in your terms, and expressing things in a really, really clear way.
Yeah, I love that, and that really affirms a lot of what we speak about. But even personally, if I was to invest in startups, and I've done quite a bit of angel investing as well, and for me, it's the simplicity of just understanding in those moments are the ones where I'm like, great, I get it. So it's just like a very simple problem statement. The solution clearly solves that problem, and just really strong understanding just in a matter of moments. Because I agree, spending too much time and just really trying to go back and forth on the deck can just that's conversations you can have in person, and that's the biggest thing I think that you mentioned there, which is great. It's just a teaser to get that meeting, which is great.
Absolutely, mate. And like, that's not to say that like we're not interested in like things that are like hard to understand. It's like deep tech and deep innovation and deep technological innovation is super interesting. But I still think at a fundamental level, you should be able to explain what you're trying to do simply. And like if the core of the business is something that requires like a deep diligence, get the investor or get the person interested in the problem and like how you're solving it first, and then get them really excited on like the meat on the bones later on.
Yeah, great. Tim just chimed in here in the comments and mentioned, always say it's to be able to be understood by a 12-year-old. So it's a good way of putting it, Tim.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a real sign of intelligence. Like, and I think some really smart people like shy away from speaking simply, and I don't think they should.
Yeah. So now that I want to talk a bit about, we're still in that, being attractive mode before we go into the process. I want to talk a bit about the founder. So, what attracts you to the founder? Because, as I can probably presume, you're obviously making an investment in the business and the concept and the idea, but you're taking a big bet on the founder of, can they be a leader of an organization? Can we trust them with our money, essentially? So, run me through kind of a bit of the interviewing that you do in a subconscious way, and what really kind of ticks the boxes for you to really, have confidence to give that founder the cash to run the business.
Yeah, it's a good point. Like, particularly early on, like the founder is so important. I think there's like a Paul Graham quote where it's like, good founder meets bad market, the market wins. Okay founder meets market, the market wins. Great founding team meets great market, the market like wins. Like ultimately, a great market can pull good products out of founding teams. And I think like even the best founders operating in really tough markets are going to struggle. Like I think that's the first caveat. And the second one is that like it's important to like not view this as like a personal judgment on people and their characteristics. And they're like, this is quite subjective. But I suppose from earlier, like the ability of a founder to sell a narrative is really important. And so like, what does that mean? Assuming that we've got product and market and stuff like that solved. Now just talking about the founder themselves. Raising capital is really hard, and like it doesn't get easier. And like it takes a certain type of person to be able to do it. And it's a person who has sometimes like conflicting characteristics, like someone who's both like really coachable and very like humble and understanding like where they need to learn, but also like quite visionary and quite steadfast in the things that they know. And those conflicting characteristics are quite interesting. And it's the person who can tell an effective story with humility. And when I'm listening to founders pitch, I think the main question I think to myself is like, would I work for this person? Because ultimately, like the success of a startup is quite dependent on like the quality of the people that can be attracted to that, and then like the concentric circles of talent that come as a result. It's what really attracted me to work at a business like Eucalyptus, where I thought Tim had these qualities. And yeah, I think it's like how do you tell a story in a way that's like both showing detail but also like understanding that you've got places to learn.
Yeah, it's great. You actually took the next note out of my mouth, which around storytelling and that narrative that you mentioned. So yeah, how often do you find that people are doing that, and it really, enthralls you in what they're doing? Is it because they may have felt the problem before, or there's a reason for that? Like, what are you kind of seeing as the stories behind those narratives?
Yeah, it's rare, to be honest, and it's something that's like an amazing part of my job is like a calendar invite comes in for a meeting, you're in it, and within 2 minutes you're like, oh yeah, this is fantastic, and it's like super energizing to be part of that. I think one train of thought is that the person has a deep connection to the problem and has like a personal experience with the problem, but there's plenty of great founders who haven't. The other way is someone is looking at something with a really different lens. Like they're looking at a problem that's been established for a long time, and like just why is this the case? Why can't I do this differently? And there's a level of like kind of naive conviction, I suppose. If you listen to like a lot of very successful founders now, they're like, if I knew what I knew now, I would never have started a company. And so it's like the confidence that and kind of like that, enthusiasm that that drags you in.
Yeah, great. Jonathan, I saw your question there, and I think that answers it, which is great. And Zach's just got a comment. G'day, Zach, one of our wonderful founders. How important, or is it important for a solo founder to have a co-founder or founding team at various funding stages?
Yeah, great question. It's something we think about a lot. So there's a few factors to answer this. The first one is like, what's the type of business you're doing? If it's like a technical business, like a software business, is there like in-house technical ability with a single founder? I wouldn't recommend a founding team for the sake of having a founding team. I think there's negatives to having a founding team as well as positives. A single founder, obviously, like not every person has their own strengths, and like they don't cover the whole gamut. So the founding team can potentially like cover those up, but also like over time, the specific roles of people within a founding team change too. And like someone who was probably the most effective or like very important at an early stage may dwindle, and somebody else may become more effective over time. It's also like an interesting way to think about the cap table too. Like if you've got one founder with 100%, four founders at 25%, like if you're raising capital, it can dilute pretty quickly. There's a whole bunch to consider. I think like don't go out and seek a co-founder just for the sake of like ticking a box that an investor wants. It's like, what is this person bringing to the table? Can I see myself working with them for 2, 5, 10 years? Same question you should ask an investor. And is this person going to grow with me? I think the things to really think about, like obviously positives, but don't do it for the sake of doing it.
Yeah. No, I really agree and resonate with that, Mitch. Sometimes founders can get too focused on being like, how do I, make sure that I fit in with the box of what an investor is going to invest in, when I think the dynamic is ever evolving, where, and you have a lot more of a holistic view on this, which is great, that every situation is unique, every business is unique. So it's just understanding and how that adds up to ensure that you're making the right decisions based on what's best for the business, not necessarily what's best for an investor's, spreadsheet that they need to tick a box because, just making sure that where that aligns.
We also get there's also a question around like, if you're a solo founder and you're raising a business and you're starting a business that requires some kind of like in-house technical build, should I go out and seek a founding CTO? There's positives to doing that, but another thing to think through is that like, as your business progresses and if it's successful, it's almost like a salary cap thing. Like the quality of talent you can attract at 0 revenue and 0 product is quite different to the quality of talent you can attract at 100K ARR, a million ARR and beyond. And so there potentially is value in like not locking yourself into a co-founding technical person without like the runs on the board. If you think you can get somewhere to a position where the business looks a lot more valuable, that's not only going to look more valuable to investors, that's going to look more valuable to people who potentially want to work there too.
Yeah, great. And Brian, I think that answers your question. We'll come back to some of those questions as well. I just wanted to go on to the second part of what we're talking about whilst we have Mitch, and that's around the process, right, of engaging with you from initial chat all the way through to actually, getting funding and beyond. You and I had coffee last week at one of our favorite cafes in Paddington, and you were talking about this business that really wowed you, which is wonderful. But you mentioned something that I really liked, that I think you may have spoken to them for the first time 8 months ago. So what we often see is that founders may speak to investor for the first time, and it might just be a no for now, and they become really disheartened, and some may even give up or get disgruntled, etc. But just understanding that this is a journey with your investor. So yeah, Mitch, if you can probably talk about even that analogy to storytell a bit about how the process is really important to remain patient.
Yeah, sure. I think this industry is, there's kind of like 3 players here, and I think I don't know, it's one. So if you're an investor, you kind of sit in between founders and LPs. LPs are limited partners, who are the people who actually invest the money in the funds. Like unfortunately, it's not my personal money. I wish it was. But our job is to raise funds from LPs, and a founder's job is to invest in, and the investor's job is basically to return money to the LPs. And so it's effectively a game of no's. Like there's so many no's that happen in this ecosystem. It's kind of incredible. like a lot of the funds themselves, when they go to speak to investors, like LPs to raise in the fund, like two yeses and 8 nos is like really common, particularly early on. So I think like the framework that investors get told no a lot to is maybe helpful and helps think about this in a different framework. In terms of like the founder investor interaction, like for reference, like out of 100 businesses that we would see, we probably invest in 1, maybe. So like that's 99 no's, and that's like particularly tough for founders to hear. Like but that is the numbers of like the investment landscape. And I think it's important to differentiate between like a no and a not now. So the company I was talking to you about, Custody, I saw for the first time about 8 months ago, and great signs, good founder, good problem, good market. Couple of things that were just like a little bit questioning on. Continued conversations with them, spoke to them a few more times, saw them again a few weeks ago, and they've made a lot of progress, and we're thinking about kind of progressing this business forward to IC. That would be a typical process for us, and I suspect a few firms. I think like you have one meeting with an investor, the investor falls over their seat, and they offer you a term sheet the next week is probably like the rarity. And even if you look at a business like Canva, I know Canva gets thrown out all the time, but like if you think about their pre-seed and seed stages, like the stage where like founders are in now, there would have been hundreds of meetings, and they've documented this, where they just got told straight no's or not nows, and like look at that business. So I think the takeaways here is like don't be disheartened by it, and also like accept that these are sometimes like quite long processes. And I think that might go into the how do you think about your business if you don't raise capital, like the raise or bust kind of dynamic. This is a long-term thing, and also like once you've received investment, you're kind of starting a long-term relationship with your investor too. So it's an industry of a lot of no's, and it's an industry where like the time frames are quite long in terms of like how this works out.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Mitch. And just further to the Canva analogy, there's also Airbnb. Brian Chesky, the founder, he's got this great post that he put on Medium where he got rejected by about 10 to 15 investors who were saying that, they don't believe in the model, they don't believe in the market being big enough, etc. And that was at a $1.5 million valuation at the time.
Yep.
So I think that feeds back into what you spoke about earlier around having like this naive conviction that, you are so, I guess, resilient and understand what you're doing and have that conviction that, even though one investor might say no or not now, that you don't let that dishearten you, that you continue your mission. And that's, an analogy for a lot of things in life, but it's specifically this process as well. Mitch, as well, like in terms of that, say 8 month, we're just using it as an example. What are some ways that, you see are really good signs that these founders may be doing? Like, are they continually keeping you in communication? Is there a bit of a cadence with that communication? Like, what are some things as well like founders can be doing after that initial chat with you when it's a not for now answer?
Yeah, good question, mate. I think founders probably have more power in the initial investor meeting than I've seen a lot of them use. And by that I mean like you like if the investor doesn't say, do you have any questions for me, or next steps, or if they say no, feedback as to why, I think is really important. Like get some clarity from them in terms of like what they're looking for, what are the aspects that they liked or didn't like, or what are the things they were uncomfortable around, what was like the red flag that stopped them from progressing the investment. I think founders have more power than they think in terms of like those discussions. And so this founding team in our first meeting were like really good in terms of like, even on the call, like what are your initial thoughts? What do you think about this? And then when I came back to them and told them that we're not progressing for this bit, I gave them feedback, and they asked for a bit of clarity on this and that, which was really valuable and showed that they were like listening and caring, but also that like it gave them a springboard to start communications, as they may have proved some of my thesis wrong over time. And I think like, the more information you can get from an investor in terms of what they're looking for, or why they said no, it gives you like less fog of war when it comes to how you communicate this in the future and whether or not they'd be interested based on the progression that's happening. With this specific example, a lot of it was around like understanding the customer and proving that this was a problem. And so they just basically went out and interviewed everyone they could find.
Yeah. So interesting. And I guess as well, it's just, ensuring that, it's not personal, right? So just because, the investor may not invest, just make sure that, you're not letting that affect the relationship and you continue that chat, which is great. And,
it's hard not to get disheartened by it, but like, also these are decisions made by people and like, particularly in this, like, because there's hundreds of things to look at, investors get stuff wrong all the time.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's, to be able to prove wrong in a way, not in a spiteful way, but just in a way that gives you extra motivation to ensure that you know what the journey you're on, you believe in what you believe, which is very important. Mitch, we've got about 4 minutes left, so I'm going to take some questions from the audience. Thanks everyone for joining in before we wrap up. So what do we got here? And Anir asked, which of the 4 Ps, product, people, plan, proposition, do you value the most before investing?
Product, people, plan, and proposition. So I think the thing I care about most is the market in which a business operates. Like I think about that a lot in terms of like, and I suppose that links to proposition. How competitive is this market? What's the edge here? How many users are there? How deep's the problem? At Folklore, we think about investing in terms of like the people, the product, the opportunity, the context, and the investment. The 2 I really focus on is the opportunity and the context, like how big is the market and how competitive is the market. That's pretty much my first stage gate. Like a lot of great businesses kind of fall at this stage gate where it's like, okay, there's only 1,000 customers in Australia that do this, or like this is really, really competitive and like margins are being compressed. That's the thing I think about first. And I think it's, you can like remove a few from a venture capital investment case, at least, with that kind of thesis in mind.
Yeah, great. That kind of answers your question as well, Prateem, around the investment committee evaluating pre-revenue products or platforms or startups. Do you evaluate the competitors to gauge edge pitched product, which makes sense. So
yeah, absolutely. I think like Folklore's perspective is we would rather invest in the number 1 business in a smaller market as opposed to the number 8 business in an enormous market. We think a lot about competition and like how you can have a competitive advantage that builds a moat over time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's often like with founders, they think, seeing a competitor that's in your industry is actually, it can be a great thing because, it does mean that there's validation of that being solved. It's like, how do we actually make sure there's differentiation in the features and things that can set us apart in a unique way?
Yeah, it's going to be impossible to be like, hey, we found this $1 billion market that currently exists and no one is in it. Like it's either going to be we're solving existing market in a new way, or we found a market that doesn't exist yet.
Yeah, no, that's really good advice. Final question before we wrap up is from Jess. Hey, Jess. So a lot of self-reflection and self-awareness is needed from a founder. Awareness precedes change, and the investor wants to see the founder's capability to grow. Probably just going back to that analogy we used earlier over time.
Yeah, sorry, mate. You cut out for the start there.
Apologies. So just asking around, is it when you see a founder from the beginning, and then you might speak to them in 6 to 8 months' time, you place a lot of importance on seeing even the founder grow themselves.
Absolutely. It's the most important thing because the successful business changes so much, like it pivots so much. And I think my time at Eucalyptus taught me that so much can go not according to plan, and like things can still go really well if you have like a very talented founding team that is willing to change and grow. And yeah, like the type of founder at a Series C business is so different from the type of founder at a seed business because the business requirements have changed, and so the founder needs to grow too.
Yeah, great. Well, Mitch, thank you so much for your time. Love chatting with you. We could probably do this all day, which is great, and appreciate the pearls of wisdom and the insight.
No, my pleasure, mate. Thanks for having me on. And hopefully it was helpful. Any other questions you find, just flick them over.
Yeah, great. So, yeah, if any current hyper founders would like an introduction to Mitch, please let your startup advisor know, and we'll make that happen. And any potential founders that are on here that haven't embarked on the journey, I'll put a QR code up after here. More than welcome to have a chat with one of our team here at Hyper to help you out and go from there. But thank you, everyone. Thanks, Mitch, and have a lovely afternoon.
Thanks so much. See you, mate.
Yeah.